All right, so this is presentation 2 for US and Canada, and this one we're going over US history. So go ahead and skip ahead. So first off, you need to know why the US is fortunate. So basically, the success of a country isn't just luck or just the kind of government you create and stuff like that. It's also just what's naturally there. What do you have available to you in the land that you have? And so we're fortunate in the sense that we have abundant natural resources. We have natural gas, we have oil, gold, diamonds, um, uranium, things like that, copper, and a moderate climate, so that way we're able to grow crops. And then, of course, we have fertile soils, which allows us to grow those crops, and plentiful water supplies like the Mississippi River, the Great Lakes, things like that. So we can farm all throughout a good portion of the southern part of the United States and even up north as well. Because of all that. So we were already basically set up to be successful just right from the get-go, just naturally speaking. All right, then going into early history, so thousands of years ago during the Ice Age, early nomads, they crossed from Asia across Beringia, which is a land bridge that connected Asia to North America. So where Russia and Alaska almost hit each other. That's where it connected. So Native Americans then spread out throughout the Americas as they moved south over the next couple thousand years. And then you fast forward a lot of years to about 500 years ago, you get to European exploration, of course, which started with Columbus. And so you got European powers trying to take over as much land as possible. Mainly over here, you have the Spanish, the French, and the British. The Spanish took over kind of southwestern part of current U.S., so pretty much all this area was Spain, including Texas. The French had the north, and then also, of course, right through here, kind of the midsection of the continent. And then the British had the east coast. And so the British were here to develop colonies. They wanted access to raw materials that they could take back over to England to make manufactured goods out of. So here, cotton, tobacco, things like that were grown. The French were looking for the fur trade. So they were coming here for fur from animals to help kind of fuel basically the fashion trend at the time in Paris. And then the Spanish in the south and southwest, they're looking for gold. They're also looking to spread Christianity to the natives as well. So they set up missions throughout this region, including here in Texas. Go down to San Antonio in that area, and all throughout this kind of region of Texas over here, there's a lot of Spanish missions that were built 300 years ago or more. All right, and then Europeans, as they grew and kind of took over, they displaced the natives, which is a nice way of saying genocide. So a lot of the natives were killed. Of course, diseases was the main killer. So it's not like the Europeans went out there and killed everybody. Diseases were mainly what took. Of course, smallpox was the main thing. But then also during this time, you had the Columbian Exchange. This is big. You need to know what the Columbian Exchange was. And this is the movement of plants and animals and diseases between the New World and the Old World. So keep in mind, there's a lot of things over here in the Americas that Europeans and Africans and Asians had never seen before. Different types of animals, different plants, crops, and things like that that had never been seen by humans on the other side of the world, and of course vice versa as well. So to give you some examples, and again, you don't have to know all of these, but here's some examples of things that came from the Americas that went to Europe and Africa and Asia for the first time. So corn, potato, the sweet potato, beans, peanuts, squash, pumpkin, peppers, pineapple, tomato, and cocoa. Of course, corn and potatoes are the two biggest things. When you think of Ireland, for example, you think of the potato famine, how much they love potatoes. But that's only been the last couple hundred years. I mean, before, 400 years ago, Ireland never had a potato. I'd never seen one before because they're not native. All right, and then from Europe and Africa and Asia to the Americas, they brought wheat, sugar, banana, rice, grape, olive oil, dandelion, horse, pig, cow, goat, chicken, smallpox, and typhus. So you see a lot of things on here that we use today. They're big in our diet, like sugar and things like that. So, and then of course there's random things like the dandelion as well. So we'll get into an actual timeline of American history, just kind of hitting some highlights. So first off, 1763, the French and Indian War. You just need to know how this connects to our revolution. So of course the British won, but they still had a lot of debt from the war, so they wanted to pay that back. So they decided to tax the colonists in the 13 colonies, and of course their argument is that they're being taxed without representation in Parliament in England. And so this leads to the American Revolution, which of course we win. You need to understand imperialism And colonialism, it's really the same thing. But you need to understand this relationship. So, and you should have learned this in U.S. history last year. So the British, and during this time, all the European countries, well, your major Western European countries are doing this. They're trying to take over as much land as possible around the world. Basically, the more land you have, the richer your country is going to be. So just simply think of England, for example. England is on an island. It doesn't have all the resources they need to fuel the Industrial Revolution, because this is like as the Industrial Revolution is kicking off. They don't have all the resources they need. And so they need access to other places to get more natural resources, more raw materials. So you could either trade with somebody, or you can just take them over and then have people work it for you and give it to you. And so that's basically what the countries do at this point. So England is using the colonies to create raw materials like tobacco and cotton. Those raw materials go to England. England manufactures those things into, shirts and cigars and things like that, and then they sell it. So if you're in the colonies, the only thing you can buy is stuff that is produced by the British. So you created the raw material, it goes to England, and it's made, and it's brought back and sold to you at a really high price. You're not allowed to buy from the French or anything like that, because the idea was to have no competition with anybody outside of your country. Basically, it's like a monopoly. So that's the idea of imperialism, colonialism. So they want to hold on to the colonies purely for the economic value of it, is what they want. All right, so in 1803, Napoleon in France, he sold Louisiana Purchase to the United States for $15 million. So we purchased a huge chunk of the continent just for $15 million. And as you'll see, a lot of the U.S., we ended up just buying from other countries. And then 1845, Texas is annexed. Of course, this is going to lead to a war, though. Oregon Territory is added on, and then the Mexican-American War in 1848 basically fought over, if Mexico didn't really recognize Texas as being an independent from Mexico. Of course, the U.S. wins and gains the entire southwestern part of the United States, so from Texas all the way to California becomes part of the U.S. Then Russia sold us Alaska in 1861, and then Hawaii was annexed in 1898. Before that, it was an independent country with a monarchy. And then up until World War II, so from the beginning of our country to World War II, we were what's called isolationist. You need to know that. That's kind of a big thing. So isolationist means that we avoid involvement in foreign affairs, so that we are totally focused on our own. And you need to know why we were able to do this. And number one reason is geography. We are isolated from the rest of the world. Most of the problems in the world and conflicts and things like that are on the other side of the world. And since we're way over here, and especially before being able to fly across the Atlantic and stuff like that, when we didn't have planes and we just had boats, we were very isolated. It took forever to get over here. And if you were to fight a war against us, like to supply your army all the way across the Atlantic or Pacific Ocean, is just ridiculous. And so because of that, it was easy for us to just stay out of other people's problems and just kind of deal with ourselves, and that's it. And also back then, we didn't rely on trade as much as we do today. Things have changed quite a bit since then. All right, so here you can see the different parts of the U.S. and when we purchased them or received them. Here's the different states and when they became states. So if you just want to see when states became states, you can look at that. So, of course, Alaska and Hawaii are two newest states in the Union. Then we're going to fast forward up to 1945. Now, I skipped World War I. We're going to go over World War I a lot when we get to Europe and Africa and Asia. It plays a huge role over there. But 1945, World War II, obviously we win that war. And because of that, we become a superpower. Our production during the war is insane. We outproduced any country by far. You just look up the numbers, it's ridiculous. But that's what fueled us becoming a superpower, because now you got all these people employed. We're producing so much. We got all these factories. So once the war's over, it's like, well, what are you going to make? We're not making ammunition anymore. Not as much. And so this is where we switch to really a big consumer economy. And so things like the Snuggie start being produced. And then, so we're a superpower, of course. Now we get into the Cold War. So the other superpower at this time is the Soviet Union. Soviet Union is definitely a superpower militarily at this time. Economically, they're still struggling and things like that. But this competition, number one, is over the arms race. So who can get the most nuclear weapons and the biggest nuclear weapons. And so it gets ridiculous to where we both have thousands of nukes, and it's just kind of pointless. But you also have the space race. The good thing about the Cold War for the United States is that it fueled innovation big time. Anytime you have competition, things are going to innovate quickly. And so this again is what spurs our development and helps our economy just grow like crazy because of that. And so this also leads to, with after World War II, we get the baby boom. Populations are expanding big time. So now we have the development of suburbs. People are moving out of the central city into the burbs to raise their kids to avoid higher crime rates. And also we see a big migration within the U.S. down south to the Sun Belt where we live. So Sun Belt basically is like from Texas over to Florida and up to like North Carolina and all that. So the South. So this area sees a lot of growth due to the advent of air conditioning and things like that. And in fact, of course, businesses can stay open longer in the South because you don't have as much bad weather. And then, of course, we see the civil rights movement in the U.S. pick up in the mid-50s through the 60s, which the 60s was crazy because you had that going on. And then you also had the Vietnam War, which is a very unpopular war that really tore the country apart. And so Vietnam War, you just need to know why we fought this. It's the same thing as a Korean War, which we'll get into more so later when we get to Asia. But the basic idea is we did not want communism to spread. Is this idea of containment that will contain communism to where it is. So if you think of it like a cancer when it gets into one organ, of course, spreads to the surrounding organs and eventually takes over the body. And so that's how we saw communism, that it's going to spread. And eventually it's going to take over the world. So we need to contain it to where it originally started, so basically Russia and then China. So if it spread from those areas, then we would go to war. So at this time you had communism, Russia, China, also North Korea and North Vietnam. And so the North Vietnamese invaded the South Vietnamese, trying to reunify the country and make it all communist. So we intervene and try to stop that from happening. And there's several reasons why we lost this war. We never lost on the battlefield, but we definitely lost when it came to the hearts and the minds of the American people. We lost when it came to the strategy we had in that war. It just was stupid. So ended up losing this war. But after this point, the American idea of how we need to combat communism shifted big time. And so this was going to help bring about the end of the Cold War. Now we start working to work things out with the Soviet Union and to find some common ground and basically demilitarize, to break down our weapons instead of continuing to build them up. Communism ends up falling in 1989. By 1991, Soviet Union is totally dissolved. Today, Russia is not communist. They are technically a democracy, kind of. All right, and then with this, of course, in class, what we did is went over the difference between isolationism and interventionism. So today, after World War II, now we intervene in a lot of world affairs. We're involved in a lot of things going on in the world compared to how we used to be. And a lot of this has changed because of the global economy. We're all interconnected and we trade with each other. Then, of course, of global threats like terrorism. That's a global threat. That's not just one country. It's many countries that are targeted for that, so that becomes a big issue. So anyways, that's about it for history. So again, just have the highlights and the main ideas and you're good on that.